All right, very good. Good evening, everyone. I'm welcoming you to another Zoom ward meeting. We had hoped to have this in a live version, but we'll talk about that in a second. But we're really pleased to have everybody join us. We have quite a bit to talk about tonight, a lot of activity in the city that we think you're going to want to know about. Tonight's session will run until about 8:30, but I think there'll be plenty of time for questions as we go through this. So if you're interested in asking a question as we go through our slides, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and type in a question, and we'll try and keep on top of those. And then, of course, at the end of the meeting, there'll be additional time for a Q&A questions that people may want to either do the raise hand function, or we'll provide a number for you to call into. So with that, I'd like to move on to our introductory slide for Jennifer and myself. You can move that over. All right, thanks. Joining me tonight is Jennifer Karras, which is our other alderman for Ward 1. So Jennifer, why don't you take a minute to say hello to everyone?
Okay, thank you so much, Jed. I'm really appreciative to everybody who's tuning in to hear what we're going to cover this evening. For me personally, it's been a great privilege to serve on the City Council, to serve with Jed as my fellow Ward 1 alderman, and to interact with all the other council members. So it's really just been a wonderful experience for me, and I'm delighted to be part of it and delighted to be here this evening with Jed to talk about a number of topics.
Great. Thank you. And also joining us is our city manager, Jason Wisha. So Jason, maybe you can say hello to everybody.
Sure. Thank you, Alderman Morris. Happy to do that, and happy to be here both to help support both of you, but also because I'm a Ward 1 resident. So this is my home turf ward meeting. I hope my neighbors go easy on all of us tonight, but really I'm happy to provide any support, and I'll turn it back to both of you for the presentation. But we'll be here to assist during the Q&A session after you've concluded the presentation. Sure,
that's great. Just so everybody knows, all of the city management team is online and are available for questions. If Jennifer and I get stuck on something, we're going to turn to some of the experts in our staff. So that's going to be very helpful. So why don't we turn to the agenda that we put together for tonight? So we talked about the introductions. The next topic is really what's going on in Lake Forest. There's a lot of new stuff happening, and we'll be talking about that in some detail. And then we'll turn to the finances. And I think you'll find that we've weathered the storm through the COVID pandemic really well. We've got a really strong story to talk about finances. And then we'll turn to some of the projects and initiatives that are going on in the city that I think affect Ward 1 particularly, but for the city as a whole. And then, of course, we'll end up at the end of the session with some Q&A. But again, if you'd like to raise a question, why don't we turn to the next slide? You know, if you're familiar with Zoom, you can do the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen and type in a question. We'll try and keep on top of that. You can also raise your hand, and our session monitor will look for those. And if it's something we want to answer right away, we can do that, or we can wait until the end. And of course, you can call in, and you might want to write this number down because I don't think it comes up again in our presentation. But if you think that you'd like to call in, it's 847-810-3680. So we'll turn to those at the end of the session. All right, well, let's get to the city overview. Thank you. If you're new to the city, and maybe even if you're not new, you probably want to know how we set our goals and our mission as a city council. And this quote here is showing up in a lot of our internal city council documentation that helps us try and stay focused on what the mission of the city council and the city staff is. And you can see it's all the important words are highlighted there. So best manage the fiscal responsibility, and appealing community, and more importantly, trust, respect, and citizen involvement. And we'll talk a little bit about citizen involvement in a second. But for those of you who are new, it's a city council form of government. It's different than perhaps the larger cities where it's an elected official with a two-party system. We have a caucus system. And if you're new to the community, I encourage you to reach out to the caucus and volunteer to be part of the caucus, because that's how we manage all of the offices, the elected offices and the appointed offices in the city. So the city council includes the mayor and 2 aldermen for each of the 4 wards. Those are slotted or put up by the council or the caucus. And then we have 20 boards and commissions, and there are over 125 residents that are currently serving on those boards and commissions. And those are all volunteers that have come to us through the caucus system. So I hope you'll get involved and help us manage the community. Okay, why don't you go on to our next slide. As you can expect, Lake Forest is a full service community, and we put these highlighted department logos up here to show you the breadth of things that we do. You can start with public safety, which includes the police and fire departments. I want to say that these are really important people who take care of us every day, and they are, for instance, on any fire call, and let me back up, for the fire and rescue department, it's not just fire. We had over 1,500 ambulance calls last month. So it's an important department. The police go on every ambulance call, and we send an extra set of firemen to those calls, so that in case there's a need to, say, evacuate somebody from an upstairs bedroom or something, we have the manpower to do that. We also have the Parks and Recreation Department, and if you have children involved in the parks, you know that the parks, the golf course, the beach, all of those are managed by the Parks and Recreation Department. Public Works takes care of all the infrastructure, all the streets and bridges and things that make the city manageable on a day-to-day basis are their responsibility. And of course, then we have our finance department, HR, IT, and so it's quite a team, and they all are out at the Municipal Services Building out in West Lake Forest by the Bears facility. I encourage you to go out and if you haven't and you have some children, go take a look at it. So maybe we can just go on to our next slide. This is about COVID. As you know, the governor has set out a mandate to use face coverings when you're inside. We have, let me just pull it up here, gotten some statistics that said that about 70% of the citizens, and we think it could be higher, but 70% of our community is vaccinated. We think it's probably higher because we think that during the winter last year, a lot of people probably got vaccinations outside of Lake Forest and probably down in Florida or wherever they might have gone. Our current positive infection rates in Lake County is 2.17%, so it's pretty low. And our infection incident per 100,000 people is 12.65, so it's pretty low. But we encourage you to continue to use your mask indoors, and hopefully the infection rate will continue to fall and we can get back to where we were some months ago. Okay, thank you. Let's go on. I'm going to turn this over to Jennifer, who's going to talk through all of the new and exciting things that are happening around the town. So Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Jed. Well, what's new? There's a lot of exciting things happening in Lake Forest. So we want to touch on what's new with the city and in our community. Next slide, please. The city is continuing to find innovative ways to serve residents and improve efficiencies. Our one new approach is the Lake Forest Now mobile app. It's a free mobile app where residents can report problems, find city information, and get notification about city activities and events. More than 2,000 residents currently use Lake Forest Now. Earlier this year, the city launched a new user-centered website to make it easier for you to find the information you're looking for. It's also a greatly enhanced touch point for those outside of Lake Forest to gain a stronger impression of what Lake Forest is all about and what it offers. The city has been focusing on infrastructure improvements, especially better stormwater management. There's also a serious focus on environmental sustainability and a concerted effort in place with the formation, thanks to Mayor Pantaleon, and a new environmental committee chaired by Alderman Melanie Rummel. And a new communication and marketing initiatives have helped to shed a proper light on Lake Forest as one of the very best places to live at every stage of life. Next slide. Restaurants. The city has welcomed a number of new businesses and restaurants to town in the last year. This includes Everett Farm and the Station in Settlers Square in West Lake Forest, as well as Donati's and its sister spot, the Tacos Place and Rosati's Pizza on the east side of town. There's a great deal of excitement around the opening of La Colonial in Market Square, which is planning for an opening sometime in the spring of 2022. Lake Forest is the restaurants at La Colonial's first suburban location. And if you don't know, it is one of the nation's most popular dining establishments. So it's really tremendous that Lake Forest was able to attract a restaurant that has that kind of cachet and notoriety. Next slide, please. The next slide's community events. So due to the pandemic, many favorite events had to be postponed or canceled over the past year, but made a much celebrated return. Among these are the Lake Forest Festival and Fireworks at Deerpath Community Park, where Lake Foresters and others enjoyed a late afternoon picnic, music, and then a grand fireworks display. Concerts at the beach and concerts on the square presented fun ways to enjoy the summer months. Lake Forest Days Parade and Carnival was back in full force, marking its 113th year. Lake Forest Music Festival debuted this summer, located in the center of town. The event was attended by nearly 3,000 people, and we look forward to bringing it back in 2022. And this weekend, the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Chamber of Commerce Then and Now Auto Show will be held on Sunday at the the West Lake Forest train station. There will be 100 classics and contemporary beauties, beer, wine, food, and entertainment. Next slide, please. This fall, Lake Forest Parks and Rec has a number of events planned for all ages, including Croctoberfest at the Wildlife Discovery Center, Halloween tricks and treats, and a nature walk. Next slide. But wait, there's more to come. The annual much-loved tree lighting ceremony returns to Market Square to kick off the holiday season on Friday after Thanksgiving, of course. Other holiday events include a Zoom with Santa, Winter Dance Spectacular, and a Santa drive-thru. Please visit Lake Forest Parks and Rec. It's actually LF, parksandrec.com for the full calendar of events and to register. Next slide. So new marketing initiatives. Let's talk about what we've been doing in this area. Last year, the city introduced Lake Forest Station. It's a special pop-up, if you haven't seen it or been inside, to sell limited edition Lake Forest branded merchandise and to showcase local nonprofits. The pop-up generated about $125,000 in sales, of which net proceeds benefited 18 local organizations. Lake Forest Station, I'm really happy to announce, will reopen this year on Friday, November 26th and run through January 9th. It'll be open Thursday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. We also launched Lake Forest Love, which is a blog and a supporting newsletter to share the amazing stories of our community. To date, some 60 stories have been written and posted, along with photographs and photo essays. About 600 residents to date have subscribed to our newsletter, and you should visit lakeforestlove.com to sign up, to see what's on the blog and to sign up for the bi-weekly newsletter. Marketing Committee also convened a community coalition connecting Lake Forest institutions and organizations. The first quarterly gathering took place over the summer at Aloha Farm, and the second one will occur in the next couple of weeks. The city's quarterly dialogue, which you hopefully have all received and read, is a monthly newsletter chock full of news and information, and is currently undergoing a rebranding and redesign to optimize this very important communications tool and vehicle for our residents. The first debuted or new redesigned newsletter will be coming out in early November, thanks to Dana Olson, our communications manager. And we're excited to announce that a new Saturday market will open on Saturday, November 27th at the West Lake Forest train station. This special holiday themed market will feature local producers, bakers, and artisans. Everybody should stay tuned for those details. If this market builds some momentum and is successful, we will think about doing a second inside market, Saturday market over the winter months, and then aim for an open air market over the summertime, again, with the same curated mix of producers, local producers, and artisans and bakers. Very excited about bringing that to the city of Lake Forest. Next slide, please. So some information on voting. Due to the delay in the 2020 census, the 2022 general primary election has been moved from March 15th through to June 18th, which I just learned. Early voting starts on June 13th. And
June 20th, yeah.
Can you hear me, Jed?
Yep. I was just saying
Okay.
the June 28th is the date.
Oh, I'm sorry, June 28th. Okay, thank you. June 28th.
Yep.
Early voting starts on June 13th in the city of Lake Forest. More information will be available early next year.
Terrific.
Back to you.
All right, thanks. Let's dig into this. I don't have access to my cursor, so there are some slides here that have some graphics on them. So I'll try and walk through those with you. But if you flip to the next slide. So as I said earlier, we've come through the pandemic really well from a budget and finance perspective. We obviously have received some federal funds to support the city, as have all the cities in the country. But we also unexpectedly had good income tax revenue sharing from the state, because all of the benefits that had gone out to people were taxable as income. So where we thought we might have had a fall in our income tax revenue sharing, it didn't occur. So we've been able to maintain a balanced budget. The budget that goes into effect for next year is going to be balanced as well, as far as I can tell. But the current one runs from May 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2022. And as you may know, we've enjoyed a AAA bond rating from Moody's for quite a while, and they just reaffirmed again recently a AAA rating, and they also gave us a interest rate of 1% on the refinancing of a bond issue so we could take advantage of the low rates. So the AAA bond rating has really paid off in reducing our debt service. So that turned out to be about a $1.6 million savings due to that refinancing we just did over the remaining life of the bond. So that was terrific. So we have very strong financial reserves. Our general fund has excellent reserves, and our other funds within the city are all well reserved and are in great shape. So I think we can feel comfortable going into next year with the current financial situation that we've got. They had a brief comment on the pension costs. As you know, pension costs for public safety staff around the state are in kind of a distressed situation. Fortunately, here we have been able to resolve the underfunding issue and have put the pension funds on a steady path going forward. So we're in really good shape in terms of managing our pension costs in literally the decades ahead. So, and then this year we have a $12.7 million capital asset program, and we'll talk about that in a second, but that's larger than normal. We have a lot of capital needs, so we're happy that we can devote that much money to working on our capital infrastructure. So next slide. This is the good news. Most of the for sale signs in Lake Forest have disappeared. As you remember, there were quite a few of them, but if you look at this slide on the right, if you look at the green line, that's the number of sales, house sales that have gone through in the past year. And you can see below that are those other colored lines. Those are the averages in prior years. So you can see the difference that the pandemic has made in the purchase of homes in Lake Forest. The graph on the left shows you the average selling price, and it's slowly recovering, and averaging at about $1 million now. So that's good news. But just back to the right for a minute, you can see the trend down on the lower part of that graph is continuing for this year. So we could continue to see quite a large increase or continued increase in sales this year. Good news. Okay, next slide. So I don't have a pointer here, but this is kind of a complicated slide. It shows you the revenue for the city. It says 92 million. That's the combined of all funds in the city. Our primary fund is the general fund, which we run most of our operations with. That's about 35 million, I think it was. And the others are the water fund, the park and recreation fund. All those funds add up to a total budget of 92 million. And then our expense, as you can see, we're coming in under the 92. Primarily it's salary and wages for our staff and contractual services where we've outsourced stuff. There's some other, the capital, the debt service. So if you want to dig into that more deeply, you can go to their website, and we have an excellent financial transparency section in the website that allows you to drill down in either the revenue or the expense and get into quite low levels of detail in the departments, across departments, whatever. So I encourage you, if you want to, jump into the website and go take a look at that transparency function. It's terrific. Okay, why don't we go on? I'm not going to try and go through this in much detail, but you can see it's quite complicated. Just to show you that the primary slices of the pie are the police department down below and the fire department. And then the other staff members are spread across a variety of departments. And you can look at that again. You can see all of this in that financial transparency section of the website. So if you'd like to go in and see how these all look in a lower level detail, just jump in and take a look at it. Okay. This is a great slide. This is the city's property tax rate in comparison to a lot of other communities around us. So you can see on the left, Lake Forest is the lowest property tax rate of all of the communities around us. So just to compare, if you had $1 million house in Lake Forest and you went out to, let's say, Libertyville and bought a $1 million house, your property taxes would be 30% higher in Libertyville than they are in Lake Forest for the city component. And I want to emphasize it's a city component. If you flip over to the next slide, you'll see what goes into your property tax bill. So when you get that in the mail and you say, where's all this money going? We can see the city accounts for our property taxes are 22% of the overall tax bill that you receive. At the bottom, you can see High School District 115 is there 25%, and then the Elementary District 67 is 27%. So that's just over 50% of your tax bill. Lake County has some, and then there are other entities that weigh in at that 12%. So we're happy that we can keep the city property tax bill as low as it is, and we look forward to continuing to do that. Okay, thanks. On our capital plan, we've got quite a bit lined up for us. A lot of it is stormwater related. So I'm showing the Burr Oak storm sewer at the top of the list. If you're not familiar, Borough is the area north on Western, where you go past the Crystal Point condominiums. That area from there to the west is all drained through a storm sewer system that goes under the railroad tracks and under the high school football field and into a storm sewer up by Lake Bluff. But it's not big enough. And as a result, this area I was talking about sees a lot of stormwater flooding. So we've got a grant program that we expect to receive funds from shortly that will enable us to redo that. And actually, it's going to be a project a little bit like the deep tunnel. We're going to have to dig up the section of Western Avenue to provide a water storage area down there so that the water will drain in there and then be slowly released into the storm sewer that I mentioned in Lake Bluff. We also have storm sewer lining improvements so that the water doesn't seep into our sanitary sewers. We have bridge and road improvements. I'll talk about those. We have some issues, continuing issues with the beach and the bluff, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. We have operating capital in terms of other projects that need to be done. And then the water treatment plant continues to be one of our investments. And you might know that our water treatment plant is one of the best, frankly, in the country, I think. Delivers extremely good water for the citizens. Okay, let me move on. So flip over to Jennifer. It's going to run through some of our projects that I briefly touched on, but she's going to dive in a little bit deeper for those.
Yes, I am. Onto city projects. So we have a new app. It is Lake Forest Now, designed as the place to find information you need about city services, upcoming events, and everything you need to know about happenings in Lake Forest. Mobile apps, an aggregator or launch pad for various applications that may be of interest to our residents. In just 8 months, the app has been downloaded by more than 2,000 users who can customize areas of interest and request specific notifications. In the app, you can request a special garbage collection, pay your utility bill, view the map of construction projects, register for classes with Lake Forest Parks and Rec, and a lot more. You can download Lake Forest Now right now from the Apple Store or Google Play. Next slide. So SeeClickFix is an online portal for residents to submit service requests, such as reporting potholes, garbage, special garbage pickup, and fallen tree limbs. SeeClickFix is integrated with Lake Forest Now, the app Lake Forest Now, under Report a Problem. Also, you can access it from the city's website under Service Requests. Since its launch, more than 1,500 requests have been resolved. Recent windstorm event, there were about 200 residents who actually used this app, SeeClickFix, to report fallen trees and large branches. And I'm happy to say that the city, actually there's a personalized component to this. This is not automated. Our city forester personally responds to those requests to coordinate pickup or to notify them when those tree limbs were going to be picked up. So that's really a tremendous story. And the next slide. So before we move on to some construction projects, I'd like to mention that the latest information on construction projects underway in your community or neighborhood can be found on the city's construction projects interactive map. You can locate the map at cityoflakeforest.com/construction projects. The updates to that map is overseen by our engineering team led by Byron Coots. They update that map on a regular basis, either daily or weekly, depending on what those changes are. So let's go into our specific projects underway, starting with the most visible one, of course, the IDOT's Deerpath Route 41 pump station project, which I'm sure everybody has driven by or been stopped nearby. The purpose of this IDOT funded project is to mitigate flooding at Deerpath and Route 41. The project's approximately 62% complete. What has been done so far? Both detention ponds have been constructed. The golf course landscaping is near completion. Landscaping along Deerpath in front of ponds number 1 and number 2 will occur this fall with in-house forestry crews. Storm sewer installations are complete. The lower levels of the pump station is under construction and all major infrastructure is complete. Focus over the next 12 months will be the pump station building, and once complete, the landscaping around the building will be addressed, and also Deerpath Road will be resurfaced. If you have any questions about that, we can address those at the end of today's presentation. The ComEd pedestrian bridge replacement, thank you. So ComEd owns and maintains the pedestrian bridge over Deerpath just east of Route 41. It is used by ComEd. The trucks use it actually to access the wires that run parallel to Route 41. The structure needs to be replaced so it can support those trucks. The ComEd is incurring the entire cost for the replacement of that bridge. But unfortunately, in order to replace the bridge, the Deerpath Road will be closed during demolition and during the installation of the new bridge deck. Work is anticipated to start as early as March of 2022, so March of this next year. ComEd right now will be hiring the contractors, and the contractor, once retained, will determine the precise schedule of both the demolition and the construction based on material availability. Jed, I think that's okay. So this is the water main replacement. Replacing the water main on Deerpath between Ahwahnee Lane to Golf Lane was identified as a priority water main replacement in 2020 water distribution study. The city's been working with IDOT and ComEd to minimize disruptions to the Deerpath corridor. I'm going to ask Mike Thomas to come on to explain the particulars of this project and the timing in relation to the other two projects that are in close proximity. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Good evening, Alderman Morris, Alderman Karas, residents of the First Ward. As Alderman Karas has explained, between the water pump project at Deerpath 41 and the ComEd Bridge replacement, the last portion of those projects will be to resurface, meaning pave, Deerpath Road from Westmoreland all the way east to the creek that is adjacent to public safety. Last year, we completed a water distribution study. One of the water mains that was identified that needed to be replaced was actually along Deerpath in a small portion on Ahwahnee Lane. We want to get that work done prior to the resurfacing of Deerpath Road. When we replace a water main in town, all the homes along that area get a new water service up to their buffalo box, the turnoff valve. That will require excavation. So we want to get those excavations done on Deerpath before the contractor comes in and resurfaces Deerpath Road. So again, we are going to be working with ComEd to strategically time this. If there's an opportunity where we can work during those closures to try and get ahead, we will. But again, this project is budgeted for next fiscal year. We may request approval by City Council to start sooner. But again, our goal is that once the Deerpath water main project is complete, the ComEd bridge is complete, IDOT Deerpath 41 project is complete, then Peter Baker will come in and resurface Deerpath Road at the very end. So that is it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate you coming on. Next slide, please. We wanted to share this slide with you because I think it's an exciting development. So Veterans Park was formerly known as Open Lands Park. It is at the corner of Deerpath and Green Bay Road on the southeast corner. Improvements include new landscaping and planting beds, irrigation, and a veterans feature and signage. Work will begin this fall and expected to be completed by May of 2022. And I imagine that we will have some kind of a ceremony to open the new park whenever it is finally complete. So that's obviously the gateway to East Lake Forest and the business district. So it'll be really exciting to see that come to fruition. Next slide.
Okay, next slide. Okay, Jennifer, I think it's my turn. We're going to talk a little bit about ravines. And if you don't live by a ravine, you may not appreciate how important ravines are to our stormwater management in Lake Forest, primarily obviously in the east side of town, but they're very, very important. and they need to be well maintained, or otherwise they degrade and they become a difficult resource to manage from a stormwater perspective. The challenge for us, the city, is that most of the ravines are privately owned, where there's some city-owned portions of it interspersed among the private ownership. So we try and work closely with the landowners that have those ravines to try and do what we can to keep them clean and operating correctly. So this year we devoted about $1 million to the Ringwood Road ravine, which is down in the southeast part of town. And you can see the before and after. It was in terrible shape and just didn't work well from a storm management standpoint. So we sent the crews in, we contracted out, and you can see the results. So there are riffle ponds to try and slow down the water as it goes through that. The sides are well fortified with stone, and we've then replanted it with native plants so that it looks much more cleaned out and much more serviceable for stormwater. And we'll continue to do that. We have another one coming this year. If you move over to that one, that next slide. For those of you who live around the college, you probably can't see it too well on this slide, but around the eastern perimeter of the college, and there's a little highlighting going on, is the Seminary Ravine Sanitary Storm Sewer. And so we're looking at what has to happen with that facility. You can see the exposed sanitary sewer down there. We need to, again, go through another cleanup like we did for Ringwood, and improve that whole flow and make sure that the sanitary sewer is well protected. So that'll be coming up in the near future. So, okay, next. The other one that we're working on are the two bridges that are over Illinois, the footbridges over Illinois and Woodland. We've found that the salt over decades have corroded the concrete and the underside of those bridges. So we are working to design the Illinois bridge as well as the Woodland bridge for replacement. And so we'll see that coming up. We expect that those roads would be closed for brief periods, unlike Deerpath, which has got a bigger challenge, but you'll see that coming up. All right, thank you. Then we're going to go back to Jennifer. We're going to talk about our beach and our bluffs. So Jennifer.
Yes, thank you, Jed. We wanted to bring everybody up to date on the Forest Park bluff stabilization. Everyone who lived here 4 to 5 years ago know that we shored up South Beach Access Road, and then a couple of years ago we shored up the north end of the access. And evaluation was done last fiscal year on the points in between, which determined the areas that needed to be shored up. So that's really where we are. We have a design that is almost complete, and Mike Thomas will be making a recommendation at the November 8th budget workshop. City Council will have to make decisions about this project, including if it will be proceeding next year after Labor Day, and whether or not we'll be completing it in one phase or multiple phases. So stay tuned on those developments. On the next slide. The beach evaluation monitoring maintenance plan. So historic high water levels on the Great Lakes in 2020 combined with large winter storms of the past few years really inflicted a great deal of damage on our beach. Extensive beach restoration was conducted in April and May of 2020 to repair the damage to the beach. We have some good news over the last year or so. The lake is currently down about 16 inches since its record high level in August of 2020. So that's some good news. We the results of the study and what that really because of the disruption to the beach, it caused us to look really hard at initiating a study. This study is important because it allows us to know how to make the beach more resilient when we do have high water levels. So that final report actually will be delivered to Chuck this coming week, and then we will determine what our next steps will be. And Chuck is available to answer any questions at the end of tonight's presentation. Next slide.
Okay, it's back to me. And I'm going to call on Joe in a minute to talk about the evaluation that the parks did related to our athletic fields. But just let me back up for a second. In 2019, Sally Swarthout and the department did a master plan for the department in terms of the facilities that they're responsible for. And in the context of that evaluation, the athletic fields obviously came up for a lot of discussion. And we are also getting comments from the community about the fields. So they undertook a evaluation of the situation. And I'm going to ask Joe to jump in and maybe comment just briefly on the evaluation and what you guys tried to look at.
Thank you, Alderman Morris. So we are currently undertaking a schematic design process to evaluate possibility of field improvements, where we're looking at natural grass options at Deerpath Park, as well as a sports complex synthetic turf option. This initiative came from, as you mentioned, the athletic field feasibility study that was completed in 2020, where the condition of fields were noted by many of our users that we need improvements. And so we were directed at that point to investigate the different options of how to improve play. So from the master plan in 2019, the idea of a synthetic turf playing surface field complex rose to the top of that. And through the process, we have contracted out currently to finish this schematic design. So we have an idea of costs of both options that we will be bringing to the full council at the workshop in November to provide the improvements that have been raised by the community. If there's anything else you would like me to touch on.
No, that's terrific. I'm just going to have a couple of comments and then I'm going to ask Jason Wisher to jump in. But as you heard, we've had a conversation at a workshop in July of the City Council talking about options for the athletic fields behind the rec center. And it come to the conclusion that we really needed to look at two options. And so that's what is in process. But we've gotten a lot of community comments on all sides of this issue. And I was going to ask Jason maybe to comment about how we're going forward towards the conversation that we'll have in November at our Capitol workshop. So Jason?
Sure. Thank you, Alderman Morris. I'm happy to do so. And as you know, we certainly understand and appreciate that this is a topic that has generated a lot of interest in the community, and certainly given the magnitude of the potential financial commitment, I think one of the hallmarks of Lake Forest city government is ensuring robust community engagement and participation in these type of discussions. And so staff is refining over the next couple of weeks a recommendation to the council on developing a process to ensure appropriate citizen and community engagement, to hear from the community about weighing sort of the pros and cons of the different options that'll be presented to the council. And it's our hope that between the November Capitol workshop and the March City Council budget workshop, where the budget is finalized, in between those two meetings, we'll spend significant time engaging with the community so that they have appropriate input into the process, and would then look for the City Council to potentially make a final funding decision in March.
Great. All right, thanks very much. And we'll be able to answer questions later in the session. So maybe we go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk just briefly about South Park. If you've been to South Park, you know what's happened down there, which has been pretty impressive. But if you haven't, we did a major renovation of the park in this past year. We've paved over some walking trails, connecting parking lots and neighborhood sidewalks. We've put in a fitness station, basketball court, bocce court, tennis courts, pickle courts, quite a range of athletic options for people coming to the park. And we also are improving the parking lot itself, around the northeast entrance. But there's a phase 2 coming, and that will again add more baseball facilities to the park. There'll be some more walking paths. We'll include a new parking lot down on the for 66 cars down south of the park, so that it'll be more accessible to more people. We also a little water feature that's the splash pad. It's should be fun for the children. So that's coming up. But adjacent to that, maybe why don't you go to the next slide, because it pertains to Joytime. I know my children actually went to Joytime as a daycare option quite a long time ago. And the Joytime property owners had been trying to sell the property, and it was a difficult sale, and it actually looked like something we should append to the South Park. The really deciding feature about that was that there's a significant water line that runs right along the property line. It's a major water line for that part of town. So we really wanted to protect that from any future development issues. So we engaged with the owners and have now added the Joytime property to the South Park. So we're happy that that's been done. Okay, next slide. And I could talk about recycling. You may have heard about Bart the cart, but if you didn't, look on the inside of your recycling can, because there is a poster there that tells you what can be recycled. And there's 4 categories of recycling. So I encourage you, the next time you go out there, take a look at that and make sure that you're not throwing old pizza boxes full of pizza, or clothing hangers, or extension cords, or styrofoam is another one. So look at the poster when you go out there, and help us, because it's gotten extremely expensive. I don't have the numbers right here in front of us for the program tonight, but the cost of recycling, where we used to make money, we now pay to have the items recycled. So the cleaner we can make that recycling bin in terms of those 4 categories, the lower the cost will be for the city in our recycling program. So we take it very seriously, and hope that you will too. So we'll move on. We have a slide here regarding the library. Some of you may know that, and I live next door to the library, and a lot of you also do. You've seen the dome that's been wrapped for a number of years. And it's because the dome is leaking and threatening the interior structure as well as the murals. And so the library board has gone through a capital assessment and a planning session. I'm going to turn to Jason, because it's now entering a new phase, and I think that Jason can articulate what the next steps will be with respect to where this library project will be going.
Sure. Thank you, Alderman Morris. And I think, as noted on the slide here, there has been a bit of a shift in direction from the library board over the last few months. They are now prioritizing the restoration of the dome, and I believe the board is in the process of soliciting qualified contractors for that work. I would note for the audience that the library board does operate independently from the city. And so although the repairs and improvements to the library are under the purview of the library board, the city continues to offer guidance and will play a supporting role as aspects of the library capital project move through any required city public review processes. So more to come on that, I think, from the library as we move into late fall and early winter, and then into 2022.
Very good. I think that brings us to the end of our prepared remarks. I see that there are a number of questions, and Mike Strong, maybe I can categorize these, kind of follow the course of our discussions. And we maybe go through I think there's a ComEd bridge question that someone has.
Yep, and I'm happy to share it with the audience.
Yeah.
There's actually two ComEd bridge questions. So the
All right.
first is asking whether the ComEd bridge is going to be widened for future road widening. And more importantly, the sidewalks are too close to the street with no divider or guardrails to protect children that are bike riding and walking. And I guess the question would be whether that the bridge will be widened, and also a question of whether there will be turn lanes added. I think that may be pertaining to Deerpath Road.
Right. So I think Mike Thomas is going to take those on.
Correct.
Yes, with regards to the ComEd bridge design, again, ComEd owns the bridge. They currently have a company called V3 designing it for them. We have seen preliminary plans. Right now, the preliminary plans do not show that the abutments are moving further north and south accordingly. But we will look further into that and have further discussions with ComEd about that. Secondly, with regards to the turn lane, as everybody knows, when you're under 41, you share that turn lane. Right under 41, they have widened, they have taken the sidewalks and pushed them further north and south. So the hope there is that, yes, they are going to have individual turn lanes going for the northbound and southbound entrance ramps rather than sharing them. So that is what the design shows, and we again will be following up with them on that as well.
Great. Thanks, Mike. And while we have you still on the screen here, there's a second question regarding the ComEd bridge that asks, what will the ComEd pedestrian bridge look like? Love the Art Deco that exists. Second question, what will the Illinois and Woodland bridges look like?
I'll take the second one first. The Illinois and Woodland pedestrian bridges will be very, very similar to what they currently are. As the aldermen have noted, those two projects, those two bridges are actually currently being designed. We're actually going to be going out to bid for them here in about a week. And the Woodland Bridge will be replaced after the high school is out. Illinois Bridge, we're going to need to determine when the best time will be for that. But appearance-wise, very similar to what they are now. As far as the ComEd Bridge, we've been working with Kathy Cerniak, our Director of Community Development, from an aesthetic standpoint and trying to give some input to ComEd. What we have come up and what we've talked to them about is very similar to what was installed at the South Beach Access Road. If you look at the sheet pile wall that was put in, there was a panel on the South Beach Access Road that has somewhat of a textured concrete look, and it will be similar to that. There won't be an arch like there is currently, but again, this design for this bridge is currently underway. So we have not seen a final design. And again, I'm not able yet to answer the question if the current abutments are going to be reused or if those will be taken down as well. This is going to progress over the next 2 to 3 months, and we should have more answers then.
Very good. While we have you, maybe Jason, there's a question about the beach that you could take on.
Sure. I will actually direct beach-related questions to our Superintendent of Parks and Forestry, Chuck Myers. And yes, the question, I think there's a couple beach questions. The first is, what are the plans for pedestrian access to the beach? They note that the steps are a challenge for families with young children and that residents would like to be able to walk to the beach with strollers and wagons.
Good evening. This is Chuck Myers. Great question, and I do have a good answer for you on this one. That When we did the the bluff study over the past few months, we incorporated the idea of putting in a walkway down to the beach at that time. So as Alderman Karras mentioned, we're finishing up that design work, and that does include some options for a walkway down. So it would be an ADA walkway. So strollers, wheelchairs, pedestrians would all be able to use that. So again, that will be going before City Council on November 4th for them to consider the different options.
Great. Thank you, Chuck. And as long as we have you, there is a second beach-related question. Has the city thought of building a restaurant / banquet room or patio for residents to host events? The design could have the sound directed toward the lake, located by the sailboat storage and fire pit area, have a glass elevator from parking lot at the top of the bluff to the restaurant below. Could be a revenue generator for the city to cover costs to maintain the beach. Also, can they groom the beach daily and spray an eco-friendly sanitizer?
Yep. On that question, I can say honestly, we haven't talked about a restaurant down at the beach, but I appreciate the creativity. It's something we could talk about. It hasn't been in the past, but great idea. I think we can discuss it with our staff. As far as grooming the beach daily, we do on a weekly basis groom the beach. We have looked at bumping that up at times, but at the moment we've got the manpower to do it on the weekend, right before the weekends, and we do it after storms. That's something we can look at, bumping that level up. I don't know of any broadcast sanitizer like that, to be honest, an eco-friendly sanitizer for the whole beach. I'm not sure about the feasibility of doing that, but again, we could look into that.
Very good.
Great.
Jason, I understand there's some questions going back on the athletic fields that you could take on.
Sure. So there's a string of questions first asking about environmental studies, better understanding the environmental impacts of installing synthetic turf. I will just say that, as part of our current due diligence, we are, in the process of looking at several of these factors. I will say at this point, we have probably more questions than answers, but certainly as the council begins a more comprehensive discussion on this, some of the evaluation criteria that we will be looking at is both the cost, what the impacts are to increased uptime and playability, the quality of the play, injury prevention, which was asked in one of the questions here, and then also the environmental impacts, and probably as well, outside revenue potential. I think that was asked in this as well. So certainly information that we're in the process of gathering. Again, we don't have all the answers yet, but we hope to as we move this discussion forward in the future. Piggybacking on that, there are several questions here about a potential community engagement process. I would say at this point, it's probably premature to get ahead of the city council in terms of what they would like to see for a community engagement process. But I think it's fair to say that it's likely to involve both, extensive surveying of the community, as well as hosting, workshops or town halls where we solicit input from the public, both to kind of share the information as we have it, but also to get feedback from all of you as to additional questions that should be considered or enhancements that should be entertained. So I will say we'll have a lot more information on that after the November 8th workshop. And in regards to how people can have access or can access information about any upcoming community engagement the city will be very proactive in trying to advertise that information using all of the media outlets and tools that we have. So whether it be push notifications through the city app, the city website, our weekly e-news blasts, all of our various social media accounts, we will engage in a pretty extensive outreach to make sure the public has access to that information to know how and when they can help participate in that important community discussion.
Great. I'm going to ask Jennifer to comment in a minute, but both Jennifer and I have gotten a number of calls and emails regarding the playing fields, and we're certainly listening to those. Jennifer, any comments there?
Well, no, I think that Jason just really terrifically covered what the approach is going to be. The time frame, of course, remains unknown because there's going to be a lot of careful due diligence to understand what these range of options are and the implications of these various options, and so that we can really think clearly and well informed about what the best decision is, the best option in the best interest of the community, and of course for those the young athletes who will be using those fields. So I think it is, Jason said, it is a very important community matter, and we have every intention of soliciting input from everybody who's interested in weighing in on this. And it's just going to be very thorough sort of investigation and deliberation on how we proceed with this.
And maybe just to outline a little bit more on the process side, just so people are aware, the city operates on a May 1 fiscal year. So as the council begins discussion on potential funding for the upcoming budget, those funds are not available until May 1. And traditionally, the council has two critical budget related workshops, one in November and one in March. The November workshop focuses on the city's capital improvement plan. That's where there will be an initial discussion about this project, but any final decisions that are that need to be made regarding capital funding wouldn't occur until March, sometimes even into April. Again, recognizing that the funding either way wouldn't be available until May 1. And that's why we do have a little bit of time to ensure that there is a robust community engagement process between November and March. And again, we will make sure that that's advertised. We don't have specifics. We're still trying to, again, develop a process that affords everybody the opportunity to provide input on this. But as I said earlier in the meeting, for projects of this magnitude, I think Lake Forest has a very long and proud tradition of ensuring significant and robust community engagement, and I'm confident the council's committed to doing that in this process as well. So stay tuned. More information to come in the weeks ahead.
Good. I think there's a question for Kathy Cerniak. We haven't heard from Kathy tonight, and we always like to get her into the conversation. So Jason, maybe you could bring that off to
Sure.
Kathy.
It's a question about downtown business vacancies, and specifically the city's plan to help improve commercial vacancies.
Thank you. I can address that. Alderman Karras talked a little bit about some of the new restaurants, both those that have recently opened and those that we are anticipating. I think there's some additional activity that isn't necessarily publicly known. I think importantly, Lake Forest is really in a good position in comparison to many of our neighboring communities. Our vacancy rate for commercial spaces, first floor commercial spaces, is quite low, in fact. We do know, as Alderman Karras mentioned, that Le Colonial is coming in the existing or the recently vacated Peanut Gallery space. There's a small plate bao bun restaurant, the Lucky Duck, that is expected to open shortly. The Peanut Gallery will resurface. We're not sure where or when, but there are some active discussions going on. We do have plans in for the Lake Forest Brewery in Westwood Square. They are looking to open ideally shortly after Thanksgiving. Actually, that one may be a little later. And there's also an Italian restaurant that we're talking with that may be a combination bakery, retail store, small scale restaurant. Market Square, we'll see a new custom window treatment store opening there. That's actually the one that's scheduled to open the week of Thanksgiving. And there are a number of other pop-up stores, retail stores that the Market Square management team is currently in discussions with. So having weathered the pandemic, what we're hearing from our property owners, our landlords, and from businesses is that we really are in a pretty good situation right now. And we continue to get a lot of calls from tenants, from some service businesses who are looking to locate in Lake Forest. So walk around and I think you'll continue to see some new things happening in both of our business districts.
Great. Jason, I think one of our residents, Romy Lopat, has a question. Maybe we've already addressed it, but if not.
I believe her question was related to the ComEd and Illinois pedestrian bridges, and Public Works Director Mike Thomas did answer those.
Okay. And I think there may be a raised hand with a question.
We do have one raised hand, and then we have, looks like about a dozen remaining written questions as well.
Oh, okay. Please charge
Go
on.
ahead and promote the raised hand.
Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Is that Sally Downey?
It is. Hi, Jed.
Okay. Hi, Sally.
Hi, I just have a couple comments and then two questions. I wanted to say the Bart the Cart campaign is brilliant. It actually changed how I recycle. So I wanted to thank you all. And I also wanted to thank Alderman Karas for I think it was her idea for the Lake Forest pop-up shop at Lake Forest train station. It was great for the nonprofits and really great to get people in town. There was a lot of buzz about it, and I think it was really a wonderful addition last year. Another comment is when you all are looking at turf fields, I hope that West Campus is also being looked at, just because if these are going to be used for tournament play or outside people, there's enough traffic on Deerpath Road and behind the middle school that I certainly hope West Campus is a viable alternative when you're looking at it. The two questions I have, one is probably not relevant right now, but I wonder whatever happened to the food trucks. I know that you all had looked at allowing food trucks to come in. So that was one question. And the other one is the city's strategic plan was from 2018 to 2022. And I just wondered if the city was planning to work on updating their strategic plan.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, Jason, you're up.
Sure. So I'll be happy to answer several of those. First, regarding the strategic plan, yes, it is our intent to engage in that process over the next, probably begin the process over the next year to 18 months. One of the things that's been a challenge with that, and we hope obviously that this will change as we move further into the future, has been COVID. In addition to the strategic plan update, we've also been in the process of updating various chapters to our comprehensive plan that was done regarding the Settlers Square commercial district out on the west side of town, as well as the Route 60 corridor pre-COVID. And then right as COVID hit, we were a couple months out from also looking at an update to the central business district and housing chapters of the comprehensive plan. And the challenge for us is that those processes require a lot of public input and citizen engagement. And it's just, as we can all see being here on Zoom tonight, it's been a challenge to find the appropriate forum to bring in dozens and dozens of people all at one time to participate in a meeting. But certainly we hope that there is a light at the end of the tunnel here, and that we'll all be able to convene in large groups for these type of critical community discussions as we move forward into the near future. And then Sally, I'm sorry, I see you're still on the call. Can you remind me of your second question?
Of the food trucks.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so for those who are unfamiliar on the call, the city council did authorize a pilot program to allow food trucks into the community. That discussion occurred, I want to say in mid to late June. We did have some limited success with them. I think one of the things we learned from our experience is that, quite frankly, we were just late to the game in our planning process by beginning that discussion in late spring into early summer. And I think, candidly, what happened was early or I would say late winter to early spring, when it would have been more advantageous to start that planning, the world looked very different, and there was no indication at that time that the CDC and the governor were going to reopen society to the degree that happened. And so we weren't planning for as many large-scale community events as ended up happening. So nonetheless, I would say, while it was probably not quite as successful as we would have hoped, I think that was really just more a circumstance of timing. And so we will be revisiting that program with the city council at the end of the calendar year here. And if the council is interested in pursuing it again, from a staff perspective, I think an important lesson learned again is to just start our planning process much earlier, probably in February, no later than March, because a lot of the food trucks that operate throughout the region here were already fully booked up by the time we ended up in June.
I'd just like to add two things. First, Sally, thank you so much for your comment on the Lake Forest Station pop-up. We're really, really excited about the reception it received and the benefit it provided. So I appreciate your comment on that. And then also with respect to food trucks, one of the reason we initiated the market, the new Saturday market, which we had intentions of starting in the fall of this year, which didn't happen, but we will hopefully, after the winter or holiday themed market, and then hopefully maybe a sort of winter month Saturday market, is to focus on an open air market beginning over the summer and to incorporate food trucks into that. So the real idea was to do something very sophisticated, well curated, with the collection of local producers and bakers and artisans, but to also have it be a real destination experience for those in town and for those out of town, to come and, for it to be sometime in the afternoon. We were thinking 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. and to have people come and have something to eat and drink and sit down, listen to live music, do some shopping, and just come and enjoy, attending something like that. So hopefully the food trucks will come to life in that fashion too.
Wait, can I just ask a follow-up then? Does the city charge the food trucks a lot to come? I just don't know are we competitive with what Highwood is doing in terms of getting them?
So we do assess a nominal permit fee. I believe it's $100 for non-local business food truck vendors. For all local businesses that operate within the community, there is no fee associated with operating a food truck. We really settled on the fee that we did after doing some pretty extensive research of what other peer or comparable communities that had food trucks already permitted were assessing. So we feel pretty confident that the cost of the license or the permit was not prohibitive for us. And that's just a one-time annual payment, the $100. It's not per event.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
So we have a lot of additional written questions here. Some of them are park related. We have 2 questions that are asking about and or suggesting the installation of fencing around some of our playgrounds. Specifically, one of the questions is in reference to South Park. So I'm going to ask, again, Chuck Myers to answer those questions.
Yes, good evening again. Yeah, it is true. We don't have many fences around our playgrounds. They tend to be very open, with the exception of Kinderhaven, our preschool. And we do have some fences on the parking lot side of South Park. We typically haven't had a lot of requests for them. We've tried to keep them fairly open. It is something we can revisit, though. I've not really been asked the question a whole lot, but it's certainly, if parents are concerned, it's something that we can reevaluate. I understand your concern, certainly, but we can talk about that as a staff. So thanks for bringing it up. We can look at it.
Great. And as long as I still have you here, Chuck, there are two questions about splash pads in our community parks as well. One specific to South Park, and the other asking just a broader question about the installation of splash pads in any of our community parks.
Yeah, happy to answer that one. So on the first one with South Park, as Alderman Morris mentioned, we did do a number of improvements last year. And that was through a partially funded by a grant from the state. So we have a master plan that includes a splash pad, and that is included in the next phase of improvements. We're currently working on that design. A lot of it is actually done. We have a footprint for a splash pad there, but we'd like to tie it into another grant request. So to do that, we would have to wait until next summer. So we are excited to put a splash pad out there. However, I think it's going to be a couple of years. Things could change on that. We'll see how the funding comes out on that. And as far as splash pads overall, we did identify those as something we wanted to do in the city. Comprehensive master plan that we did a couple of years ago identified it as a deficiency. So we heard the concern and we've been looking at it pretty heavily. So we are considering one next year. And again, this has to go to city council. So we haven't talked to them yet at our meeting. So we are considering another one that could possibly go in next year. So that would be at a different park besides South Park. But with that one, we're currently working with an architect on the design work on that. So I hope to come with a proposal to city council. And if they see fit to approve that or consider it, you may be seeing something as soon as next year.
Jason, there's one more question about South Park. Do you want Chuck to respond to that?
Oh, yeah, thank you. So Chuck, the question is, can the Parks Department build a gradual slope path from the bike path parallel to the train tracks down to connect the paths by the baseball fields?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, that has been looked at through the master plan and the design work that is being done right now. We're also, by the way, as a side note, we are designing a new parking lot for the whole south end of the park, which has a turnaround. It's going to be a much needed improvement. So that design work is pretty much done. But as part of that, we asked for a better way to get to the McClory bike path. So we are going to move it to the north. And if you're familiar with the park, it would be just off to the west of the northernmost ball field. Yeah, perfect. They just put up the image. So it will be, it will be where you see the letter M. That's not it, but just north of that you see, or just east of that, you see a path there. That is going to be the new connection, and that offers a much better grade. So it would be an ADA path. It would be something that bikes could come in off the trail, or walkers could use right out of the park. So that is being designed. And again, I would say that the timing on that is probably a couple of years out, but we'll see. So hopefully that answers that.
Jason, we have about 8 minutes left. You want to,
Sure. We can
curate
run through a
those
few more
questions?
questions we have here. Oh, he just left. There is one more question that I would actually direct to Chuck Myers, and that is regarding the Forest Park Beach project. And the question is whether that project is being led by or has participation from a local landscape architect who is knowledgeable of its unique character.
The beach project is being led by a company called Smith Group. It's an engineering firm that has expertise in coastal structures. So we have asked them to look at various different other things besides engineering features. So we are looking at other improvements. We're looking at some native plantings down there to help with erosion. But we don't have a local architect, I think the question was. We don't have anyone local working on it. Smith Group is a larger company. They've spent a lot of time down there. They have a landscape architect on their firm, and they were part of the team that did the whole study.
Great, thank you so much, Chuck. And just moving through a few other questions. We have one question asking for a comment or just looking for an update on the status of the Deerpath streetscape improvement or beautification project. I'm going to ask Jim Lockefier, our Assistant to the Public Works Director, to answer that question.
Yes, good evening. And just to give a very quick background information on the project, about a year ago in September, a project recommendation report was finalized by a Deerpath Streetscape Ad Hoc Committee. That committee was represented by various members of all the city boards and commissions. And with that finalized report, we proceeded to submit that with a grant application to the state to seek funding for construction. Unfortunately, we found out this past summer in June that we weren't successful, but the good news was we were close. Staff right now is looking at forming some recommendations how we might be able to bring those plans further along to potentially submit another grant application for that next state grant opportunity cycle, which is fall of 2022. But I would encourage anyone, if they're curious about that recommendation report, it is available on the city's website.
Great, thank you so much, Jim. We have two suggestions related to the library. One is for an underground parking lot, and the other is for flashing lights for a crosswalk across Deerpath, similar to the Lake Forest College crosswalk on Sheridan. Again, as I had noted, the improvements to the library do fall under the purview of the library board, but we're certainly happy to pass along any suggestions and work closely with them in the event that they want to pursue any of those projects further. And there are a couple more, looks like athletic field related questions, more process oriented regarding the timing for some of the option evaluations. So maybe I'll just emphasize again real quickly that the work that is currently being done is really just pre-design work that is meant just to provide high-level estimates of potential costs to look at the various improvements, what would be potentially sought as we go into the November workshop meeting, and then obviously into the March budget workshop would be potential design funding for whichever option might be considered by the city council. And really the city's process is to approach design and construction funding in a multi-year cycle for a lot of our large-scale capital improvement projects. So really the earliest that the city would be looking at committing funding for construction would be as we start our budget planning process for this time next year. So again, I know for some that may be a process a little slower than one might appreciate, but again, I think the deliberative nature of the city's capital planning processes has usually served us pretty well, and certainly ensures that voices from the community, questions, concerns, suggestions are all incorporated into the final product. So again, there will be much more to come on this from the city in the weeks ahead. So please stay tuned. And again, I can only emphasize that we'll push out the information through all the platforms that we have available. And it looks like we have a couple questions left, and then we also have a raised hand. Alderman Morris and Karas, would you like us to take the raised hand?
Sure, that makes sense.
Lori, I think you've been promoted, but you're muted at the moment.
Sorry about that. Hang on. Can you hear me now?
Yes, who's
Okay.
speaking?
Yes. Hi. So overall, I think the city does an absolutely amazing job between programming, infrastructure, capital projects, et cetera. I am deeply concerned, especially after the third rail issues, that the environmental studies and the impact that the artificial turf fields will have is significant. And I don't think there's enough attention being paid to that. I'm concerned that people just want the shiniest and brightest thing. And that between that and the increased risk of injuries by kids on artificial turf fields, I don't feel assured that those things are being looked at. It sounds like you're just going to just get costs for both of those and not consider the other issues.
Sure. Well, let me speak for myself, and Jennifer can jump in. We've had calls on both those issues, and we've tried to assure people that those are issues that'll be addressed in our discussions going forward. And then Jason can comment as well, because he'll be leading the charge on those conversations. But Jennifer?
Well, I concur with Jed. I mean, there's no, foregone conclusion on this. This is a very, very important matter for the city of Lake Forest, for city council members. There are a lot of people who, clearly we've identified the issue. We need to upgrade our athletic facilities. So we certainly intend to do that. The question is, what is the right approach for this? And, I don't think that there's an obvious, there's an obvious option for us at the moment. It's, not that we look to neighboring communities and see that they have turf fields and, that we just jump on that bandwagon. I think that there are a lot of instances and a lot of case studies that show us that some people have incorporated artificial turf and then have decided to go in a different direction for various reasons, whether it be environmental impacts or it be the rise in injuries. And then there's improving the grass turf fields. There's downside to incorporating those too. So I think it's just it's sort of one of the early innings in all of this. We really need to spend a lot more time researching, discussing, deliberating, understanding the pros and cons, and then doing what's again, I think Lake Forest has always been at the forefront of leading on various questions and issues, and it's not in our character to just do what others around us are doing. So again, this is a very important issue for us, and we take it very seriously, and we'll look at, again, the environmental impacts of it, the injury related impacts of it, and again, we'll decide and what is in the best short and long-term interests of our town, the community, and those who will be utilizing those athletic features.
And Jason, I know you've talked about this, so maybe just a brief summary of the process.
Yeah, sure. Again, it's early in the process. Certainly good feedback that we've heard tonight, and I expect we'll continue to hear that, and consistent with what we've already heard regarding several of the concerns on both sides. And that's where I'll just emphasize that, that staff through their development or development of an evaluation process really tries to look at the trade-offs objectively for all options. So I know there's been a lot of interest tonight on the environmental impacts, and I would note that there's aspects of that need to be studied on both sides, whether it be the use of synthetic turf and what impacts that has on our environment, on potential surface runoff of water, as well as looking at the environmental impacts of natural fields where there's high levels of water usage, potential fertilizers and pesticides or other products that need to be applied to ensure it remains in good condition. So all I ask is that the public recognize that while it's wonderful to have strong opinions on this, and we welcome everyone's input, that really we're looking at trade-offs, and that's where, again, I think in trying to kind of weight these criteria, I think it'll be helpful and useful for the council to hear from the public as to what are priorities of the community, and again, we expect to have those conversations in the months ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then we have one last question. I've saved the best for last. I'm going to say a quick hello to Tyler and Ray. The question is whether, in regards to the opening slide we had of the very nice light post that was pictured, does the city have any plans to modify or replace those with something that has the same visual appeal, but is also a bit more sensitive to outward or upward light pollution concerns? And I'm going to ask Dan Martin, our Public Works Superintendent, to answer that question. I believe Dan's on the call still.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. We have not had any discussions, or I've not heard or been anything regarding if we're going to be modifying or changing any of the lighting on any of our light poles. We had not at this point received any feedback or concerns about the lighting, but it's certainly something that can be discussed and looked into. But at the current time, we have not heard anything or any complaints until now, or any concerns about the lighting for the street lights. So that's it.
We're good. Kathy Cernick always talks about Lake Forest being a dark community. And if you drive around compared to other communities, it is pretty dark. So hopefully it'll stay that way. But so Jason, I think we finished everything.
Yeah, there is one final suggestion, really probably meant for staff, just about the manner in which we can communicate perhaps for future ward meetings, that these have all been rescheduled to a virtual format from the initial in-person meeting. So a good suggestion for us. We appreciate receiving it, and we'll look to do that as we move into the remaining 3 ward meetings.
All right. Well,
that concludes the question. So happy to hand it back to both of you.
Sure. Let me just comment, and I'll let Jennifer jump in too. But I wanted to thank everybody for participating. These are important opportunities for the City Council to try and share some of the information that we have with our constituents and people who live in our wards. So it's really helpful if we can get as many people to join us in these conversations. We get a lot of good ideas, some of which have come up tonight, and really good feedback. So I want to thank everybody for participating. Jennifer, any comments?
I just want to add that Jed and I are very, very accessible by email, our city emails, or by mobile number. You can text us, call us with any questions or suggestions. We love to hear from members of the ward, residents in the ward. And I personally, I'm sorry that we couldn't hold this ward meeting in person. It's the second one I've had in this setting, this environment. It's been frustrating for me because it's one of the best parts of this job, this role, is interacting with our residents of the ward. So that's been disappointing for me. So I appreciate everybody jumping on Zoom to hear the presentation and to ask questions and to offer your comments.
Great. And Jason, thank you very much for your help in walking through a lot of these details, and all of the senior staff that have been on the call tonight. That's been very helpful for us. So thanks to everybody on your staff and yourself. So thank you, and good luck on the other 3 meetings. But I think we've had a great meeting tonight. So thank you. Thanks, everybody, and good night.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Jed.